Hi, my name is Liam and I'm from Nguyen Brothers. Now, I'm at Wired for Wonder where we have 4 fantastic speakers for you to hear from. A poet, a magician, an inventor, and a slightly less scary version of Big Brother. I hope you enjoy. Thought control and the blurring of the lines between virtual reality and reality. It sounds like something out of the movies. Well, Dr. Jordan can tell us more.
So, my name is Jordan Nguyen. I'm a biomedical engineer, and biomedical is very much sort of innovating and inventing new medical devices, and they can be for, a whole range of areas of health. And for me, my focus is disability. So we designed a brain-computer interface, and this was with the Centre for Health Technologies in University of Technology in Sydney. And we designed a brain-computer interface. So it was basically a headband with some electrodes in it, completely non-invasive, and it picked up on the electrical activity of the brain and allowed a person to focus on different thoughts to control the wheelchair and to allow the wheelchair to move so that the wheelchair knew where it was supposed to go.
I guess, well then, in that case, what type of disabilities can that be used for?
Disabilities, there's a lot of crossovers. When we're looking at cerebral palsy, motor neuron disease, spina bifida, spinal cord injury, there are so many different things that would require it. It depends on the type of level and the type of options that are available for things like mobility. And these have crossovers again into communication, into entertainment, education, all of the different things that you use throughout the day to access, information, to do all the things in your day-to-day life. We need to design different devices for those people who don't have the same modes of movement. And so the inspiration to design this wheelchair was to try and break through those barriers and to release new products to the market that reached higher levels of disability to allow independence in many aspects of their life.
I guess, can you also talk about their personal experience? I mean, you were paralysed for 24 hours, is that correct? What was that? I know it's hard to create a parallel considering it's a lot lifelong.
Yes.
But then how did you actually feel? Like you're sitting in a bed and you cannot move. What was that like? I mean, I know it inspired you to create this, but what was that like?
It's a truly life-changing thing. I'll set the record straight. I think, I can't remember where that came from. I wasn't paralysed. I got to experience what it's sort of like to be paralysed. And I guess it's something that you don't forget. You'll never forget it. It's just when you have a moment like that in your life that just suddenly changes your perspective on everything in an absolute moment. I thought I had everything taken away from me. The crunch and that sound and the feeling I felt in my neck, that moment has gone over in my head many times since, and that was about 8 years ago now. And that is quite honestly terrifying. You suddenly start to think about all the things that you take for granted, all the things in your life that you know that you've got and that you can do, and then you start to think differently. You think, has this been taken away? Am I ever going to do things for me? I was saying, am I ever going to play tennis again? Whenever I used to injure myself, I'd think, can I play tennis? If I can, great, I don't really care. It was the biggest part of my life, and so that really made me think differently about life and completely changed my perspective on life too.
So, do you see a future where disability doesn't exist, but it's rather just diverse forms of living?
I think we're going to get there. I think advances in science and technology, they go different ways and they work in parallel. So obviously, technology advances help science advances as well. And so the way I see it is things like the wheelchair, things like making things smarter and being able to create new devices, they're all a gateway. It's a bridge to bridge the gap between now and when science really takes over and allows change and allows repairing of, say, the spinal cord or cures to the individual disability. And I think we will get there. I think for many disabilities they are curable, but they're complex. They're very complex.
Maybe not in a sense of curable though, but maybe in a sense of just acknowledging that they're actual disabilities, but we can live with them and integrate them in a sense.
Absolutely.
So not in a sense of curing them, but just having them as a part of life.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and I think that's, we are already there. It's just society needs to have that change, and a lot of that comes with awareness. When you meet someone who can change your life and change the way that you think about life within a few moments, it's a beautiful thing. I think that it's opened up my horizons, and I've just gotten to know some of the most amazing people I know happen to have disabilities.
It's that idea of you're creating these new ways and these new forms of how people can just live a life. And it's incredible, really.
Well, that's it. I think it's really, it's a change in perspective. So the way I see it is, you know, the brain is so incredibly complex. I mean, it's this thing that we're still learning to understand, and you know, I think it's going to take quite a lot longer before we actually fully understand the brain. We have our conscious mind, and that's in the same area of real estate as the rest of the brain, which is controlling everything that happens in this body. It knows how to send the signals, it knows how to receive all the sensory signals back, and it knows how to interpret all of that, do so much all at once. It processes huge amounts of data. And at the same time, then there's our conscious mind, which is within the same real estate, yet somehow there's some things that don't go between, and there's some communication that doesn't happen there. We don't know how our body operates, but we're still somewhere within this brain. And that's a strange thing. The brain knows how to operate the body, yet our conscious mind doesn't. We have to learn about how our body works. It's really that the brain is this central processing unit. It's our CPU. You know, it's just like, you know, what runs your computer. This is the thing that processes everything with our bodies. And our bodies are kind of like a big meat vehicle, you know, and this is the thing that this is the shift in thinking that I've had when I've seen how sometimes the brain can be disconnected in some way from the body, or have signals flipped and interpreted in different ways, or the connections won't get through. The connection is either broken or it's somewhat changed. When the mind is working absolutely fine and it's just more like a disconnect to the body, that's where I thought, I understand this and I understand how to make some changes here. And that's where I wanted to really learn a lot more about how those signals get to the rest of the body and how we can intercept them and take those signals, amplify them and use them to control equipment. Because again, going off brain plasticity, the idea is that the brain can just rewire itself very quickly, and you can build up coordination very quickly to use devices as an extension of yourself. And that's a really interesting thing, and that's what I want to get towards. Yeah.
Yes, then how does this wheelchair, you know, can a wheelchair run in fear? Can it move in fear? Like, you know, can it pace itself in anger? How does that, how does the machine, you know, recognize emotion? Okay,
so recognizing emotion is, I guess, different to displaying emotion. Two very different things. And I guess when we're looking at a robotic system, we're nowhere near self-awareness, true self-awareness in robotics and artificial intelligence. Yet AI has gotten to the point where it's still up there with being pretty, you know, I guess, exciting and creepy at the same time. And we have that ability to be aware of ourselves and aware of our environment and really analyze all of those. And I think that's a very interesting thing. So being able to analyze the signals from the human brain about, you know, what's going on, what's happening in the brain, what are we thinking about, that sort of thing can be done, and those are done through brain-computer interfaces, where we can do things like visualize something, visualize a 3D object and imagine it rotating, and then we've got a piece of software that can pick up on that, look at the patterns and understand that you were thinking of something that it has seen before. A lot of it comes with training. You train the software to learn to see the patterns. So this can then be used to control something like a wheelchair, like a smart wheelchair. But having the smart wheelchair itself be self-aware or feel things like fear or happiness or sadness, we haven't gotten there yet. And arguably, I don't think we really should get there. I don't really see so much the point personally. Personally speaking, I don't see the point in trying to get there. But people like to, because, you know, we do like to marvel at our own creations. I've seen humanoids that can simulate emotion. You know, he'll say, you know, I love you, and then stop and analyze it. He'll go, well, I love you as much as a robot can love, in that I know these are programmed emotions, and this is a response, and this is a simulation. But as far as I know what the meaning of love is, I love you.
That kind of is that brings up a very interesting topic, I guess. So can there ever be a line drawn between, you know, what is man and then what is machine?
True. I think that we definitely do need to draw lines, but it's very hard. Whenever we venture into new territory, it's very hard to draw lines as to what should we be doing and what should we not be doing. Because as innovation turns up and starts disrupting the industries, these things change so quickly, it's very hard to keep up with. And it doesn't matter what it is, when it comes to these sort of innovations, you're going to get a polarisation of people.
And what would be your concern in a sense of having a humanoid robot? I know humanoid is probably a blanket term, but...
Yeah, no, it's very true. I think that when it comes to robotics, you've got to look at the bigger picture. You know, you've got to look at the bigger picture. Why are you designing robotics, and how is it going to be integrated into the lives of the people around it? And then, you know, for any particular design, what's its purpose, what's its function? And then when you're designing software, and as software and algorithms get more and more intelligent, which they do, artificial intelligence does get more and more complex, you've got to think, where's our limits, where are our boundaries, what is this thing's purpose? Because is there a point in putting too much intelligence into something? Also, if you're trying to get towards, if we're looking at humanoids, we're trying to get towards something close to resembling self-awareness, where it can make its own decisions and it can formulate its own ideas, basically taking in information from its environment and then deciding what it's going to learn and what it's not going to learn, what sort of areas it's going to venture into. How much do you let it understand itself, the way that we do? You know, again, we don't understand our entire body, we have to learn it. How much do you let it know about itself and be able to manipulate itself? How much do you let it manipulate its environment? And how much do you let it interact and understand all the people around it? So if they then became self-aware and then they decided that they didn't want to be ruled by humans, that's where the Matrix idea is. And when it comes to virtual reality, it's exactly where we're getting. We're getting towards this term called virtual presence. So something like the Oculus Rift or some form of virtual reality device, you put a headset on, and that tricks your visual sense straight away, because when you turn, it turns with you. And so you're looking at whatever, you know, you feel like you're there. You can turn all the way around and you see what's behind you. Once you start getting through all of those things and tricking more and more senses, that's when you get towards the term called virtual presence, where you are in and you feel like you are completely in a virtual world. And I can tell you already, it's gotten to the point where you can let go quite easily and you can just feel like you're in this virtual world. So horror movies don't scare me at all, because you've got that disconnect. You know, if really there's something you don't want to see, look away from the TV. You also know that when you're not watching the horror movie, that you can be walking through the hallways in your own house and you can turn around and you know you're not going to see anything. Now when you try a horror game and the first time it hits you that you can't see anything but you can hear it, and you realise if you turn around you're going to see it, I can't describe the feeling it gives you just the first time. It is terrifying. And then it throws you off when you're back in the real world. It can, depending on how immersed you find yourself. You can be back in the real world and then you know, you sort of get that uneasy feeling that you've turned around in a game and you've seen something scary. Now the thing is, I think this is where the real interesting part of virtual reality is. It's not just when you're there experiencing it. It's when you think back to the game that you just played or the experience that you just played and you feel like you just actually experienced it. Because so many of your senses were tricked at once and you tend to remember things in context. So you remember that context and it doesn't feel like you just played a game, it feels like you were just there.
The philosophical question of whether we are as human beings within this reality, is this reality real? And then, you know, we question if the reality that I'm sitting here, I'm existing. You know, I think therefore I am. And then you have, you know, this virtual reality. You know, but in a sense that's now becoming blurred completely, because it's like you're feeling it, you're in it, and then this is the world which I'm in and I feel. I guess, how, can you discuss this blurring of the lines between these two fundamental realities, I guess?
Really, when it comes to the blurring of the lines between what's real and what isn't, it's a very interesting thing. It's a very interesting thing you raise. It's our idea that if we see and touch and feel and hear and use all our senses, and we're engaging all those senses, then it must be real. And that's why you can trick those senses, because if you think about it, everything we sense are electrical impulses sent to the brain, and it's the way that the brain interprets it. And so we might potentially perceive things quite differently, but not realise it because we explain what we see. You might see something that you call red, and I see it as well, and I say it's red, but the way you see it might be a completely different thing. You might be seeing what, if I was looking through your eyes, I'd be like, wait, that's blue. How do we know? What if that colour spectrum that we know is shifted between different people, and you've got somewhere else that's, everyone's got a different calibration? We can't possibly know that because it's, when we describe it based on what we see. What I wanted to look at was what are the ways that we can change that for the better? What things can we use virtual reality for in a good way? And I think that it can have very positive impacts. I've seen research of someone using an amputee who doesn't have an arm, using a virtual reality device that shows them that they've got a hand, and then it helps get rid of phantom pain. And that's the interesting thing. I see where the research can go, and I can just see so many possibilities on where the research can go. So that's why when it comes to virtual reality, I'm working with a little startup that I probably wouldn't have gone on board with if they didn't have a research psychologist. That was really interesting. I thought there's a lot we can gain out of this and see the positive impacts that it could potentially have, because it's going to have both. And again, when these technologies come along, a lot of the time they have both. So it depends what you want to focus on.
In scientific research, I guess, is there a battle between compensate and eliminate?
That's a very good question. So I guess, so to compensate or to eliminate, I think it's a really interesting topic. I think it's a really interesting approach that different people take, again, differently. So for me, I think in terms of disability and the areas that I look into, I look at compensation until elimination comes along. So when we're looking at, and when I say elimination of, say, a particular condition, I say we compensate because compensation can be a lot faster. When we're saying compensate, I'm saying design, say, a wheelchair for mobility. Until something like a cure comes along to spinal cord injury, and you have a wheelchair as your main method of mobility, make the wheelchair more intelligent and allow it to be accessed by more people by people who have, say, spinal cord injury. So target the people who don't currently have access to the devices, allow them to use it as well, and that's compensation up until the point where we can eliminate that problem by fixing the spinal cord in some way. Now, again, this is the idea between compensation and elimination. We don't know how to eliminate that problem, but if that happens, if that occurs, that'll likely put the first one out. So that's where the competition comes from. But I think, in general, for the overall human race, compensation and elimination generally work together.
I guess, how do you see the future of youth and science? How are they intertwined now, do you believe?
I think that it comes from the perspective of technology. I think the youth of today are absolute technological integrators. They understand technology in a completely different way to their previous generations, and this is the sort of thing that we need to help nurture as an older generation. Any generations before them need to start helping nurture this and to understand it, because we marvel at technology, whereas as a whole the younger generations don't. They just see the limitations of it and they see what they can do with them. And to have that from such a young age, as long as we give them the right guidance, they could go into the things and use the technology in a way that will make impact. They can learn to innovate, and if they learn to innovate and also see the areas that they could go into and be inspired by the things that will make change and make the world a better place, then, they will lead themselves there. And that's really, I guess, a big area that I want to have involvement in, because there are many issues plaguing our planet, and we need to be able to all work together in some way and be able to guide the next generation coming through to make the changes that we can't ourselves. And this is a big part of why I'm here.
Wow. What more can I say? Science as a discipline, in my opinion, shares many parallels to the arts, such as journalism, photography and film. The main force driving both is our curiosity and our beautiful disposition to ask why. We are all truly wired for wonder. I hope you enjoyed.